John Wayne versus Joseph Stalin. The unbelievable story of how Soviet communist dictator Joseph Stalin tried to have movie star John Wayne assassinated, not once, not twice, but at least 3 times. Stalin sent KGB agents to the United States in the late 1940s and 50s with orders to take out John Wayne multiple times, which is pretty crazy. The bizarre saga of Joseph Stalin's attempts to have John Wayne assassinated is a testament to the deep ideological divide between Soviet communism and American individualism. Before we get into the actual attempts on his life, we need to understand the two figures' complicated history. If you know anything about movies and cinema, you know that John Wayne is considered one of the greatest actors and movie stars of all time, starring in golden era Western classics like Stagecoach, The Searchers, and Rio Bravo. The Searchers is a great movie that still holds up to this day. This will be my recommendation for people who haven't seen a John Wayne movie. During his career, he participated in 179 acting roles and was the biggest box office draw for over 3 decades during the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. During this period, his films weren't only popular in the United States, but worldwide, including the Soviet Union, for those who had access outside of their strict censorship. This was Joseph Stalin and his group of elites in the government. Joseph Stalin was the second leader of the Russian Communist Party, established by Russian revolutionary Vladimir Lenin in 1917, the leader of the Bolshevik Revolution, which overthrew the Tsars and placed Lenin's party in power of Russia. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, Stalin steadily rose through the ranks of the Bolshevik Party. In 1922, he was appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party, a seemingly bureaucratic role that gave him control over the party's appointments and internal organization. This allowed him to place loyal supporters in key positions. Following Vladimir Lenin's death in 1924, a power struggle erupted between leading Bolsheviks. Stalin turned against his former allies, eventually ousting all opposition. Though Lenin had warned against Stalin's increasing power in his final writings, Stalin suppressed these warnings and positioned himself as Lenin's true successor. As General Secretary, Stalin controlled the appointment of party officials. This allowed him to fill key positions with loyalists who ensured his policies were carried out and his opponents were marginalized. By the late 1920s, Stalin had consolidated his grip on power. He launched purges against perceived enemies, leading to arrests, executions, and the exile of rivals like Leon Trotsky, who was later assassinated in Mexico in 1940. The Great Purge of the 1930s further cemented his totalitarian communist rule. By the early 1930s, Stalin was the undisputed leader of the Soviet Union, ruling with an iron fist through propaganda, purges, and a cult of personality. During this period was a formation of a new security agency that would eventually be called the KGB. This is important for the story and we'll be back to it later. This may come as a surprise, but Joseph Stalin was a big fan of cowboy movies and American films in general. He had his own private theaters in every home he lived in during his time as Russia's ruler, watching many of John Wayne's cowboy movies depicting the ideals of American freedom. Stalin was conflicted about his feelings about Wayne and felt that he was the only man in the world more influential than himself. Even though Stalin thoroughly enjoyed Wayne's movies, the movies that Wayne starred in, as well as how Wayne moved in the real world, was against everything Stalin stood for. Not only did John Wayne's films represent American ideals and freedom, John Wayne was one of Hollywood's most vocal anti-communists, and his involvement in anti-communist activities spanned multiple facets of his career and public life. Wayne was a supporter of the House of Un-American Activities, or the HUAC, which investigated alleged communist influence in Hollywood. He backed the blacklisting of suspected communist sympathizers and spoke against industry figures he believed were aligned with leftist ideologies. In 1944, Wayne helped establish the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, MPA or MPAI, a conservative anti-communist organization in Hollywood. The group included other prominent figures like Walt Disney, Gary Cooper, and Ronald Reagan. The MPA worked closely with the HUAC, providing names of suspected communist sympathizers and pushing for blacklisting within the industry. The MPA collaborated with the HUAC and actively opposed leftist filmmakers, contributing to the Hollywood blacklist era. Wayne frequently made public speeches condemning communism, positioning it as a threat to American values. He gave interviews stating that he believed communism should be eradicated from the United States, particularly in Hollywood. Though Wayne never personally testify before the House of American Activities, he was outspoken in his support for the committee's investigations. He publicly condemned communists in Hollywood, arguing that they were trying to subvert American values through film. He also backed the Hollywood blacklist, which led many writers, directors, and actors being denied work based on alleged communist ties. Through sources and spies that Stalin had in the United States at the time, he discovered John Wayne's views were not just represented on screen, but he was actively trying to eradicate communism. Stalin was furious and decided he was going to do something about it. When Stalin gave orders, no matter how preposterous the task, they had to be fulfilled, or else you were sent to the gulags or executed immediately. I don't know which one is worse. The KGB, or the Committee for State Security, was the primary security agency for the Soviet Union. It functioned as an intelligence, counterintelligence, secret police, and border security organization. The KGB played a significant role in both domestic and foreign affairs, engaging in espionage, political repression, and covert operations worldwide. Russian President Vladimir Putin was a KGB officer before the end of the Soviet Union in 1991. It was their mission to take out Stalin's ideological enemy number one, the Duke, aka John Wayne. Hit attempt number 1. In 1949, 2 Russian KGB members were sent on a mission to assassinate John Wayne. The KGB hitmen traveled to Los Angeles, California and discovered John Wayne's office located in Hollywood, specifically at the Warner Brothers studio offices. Dressed as FBI agents as a disguise, they drove around the studio until they finally found the right building. They pulled up to the building and were ready to carry out their mission. As they approached the doors of the building, little did they know that their moves were being tracked by the FBI and were intercepted before they could enter the building. FBI agents apprehended the KGB agents and were swiftly taken away. Wayne himself was already aware of the threat and worked with the FBI and local police to set a trap, leading to the hitman's arrest. Hit attempt number 2. A few years later in 1953, the KGB decided to fulfill Stalin's orders again. Another attempt was made on John Wayne's life, but once again Wayne was prepared. Playing chess with his adversaries, he was one step ahead. The story goes that Wayne and his friends, possibly including stuntman Yakima Canute, managed to capture the 2 Soviet agents, either at a studio or some other meeting place. Instead of turning them over to the authorities right away, Wayne and his crew reportedly took them to a secluded beach in Southern California, conducting their own version of an interrogation, where they staged a mock execution. This event had the KGB agents so shook that they were too scared to return to Soviet Russia and report the real events. Sources even suggest that the KGB agents started working for the FBI shortly after. Hit attempt number 3. Even after Stalin's death in 1953, there was still an order on Wayne's life. In 1955, Wayne received intel from the FBI that there was another group of communists based in Burbank, California, who were organizing a plot to assassinate him. Once again, Wayne was ahead of his ideological enemies and took matters into his own hands. A group of stuntmen that were loyal to Wayne were dispatched and ambushed the communists, physically overpowering them in a brawl. If you know anything about stuntmen at the time, they were guys you do not want to mess with, especially the ones working on cowboy movies with John Wayne. The group beat the commies so bad that they fled Hollywood, never to return. Years later, the orders on John Wayne's life were eventually rescinded by Stalin's successor, Nikita Khrushchev, something that Wayne was told by Khrushchev in person. The bizarre saga of Joseph Stalin's attempts to have John Wayne assassinated is a testament to the deep ideological divide between Soviet communism and American individualism. Stalin saw Wayne as not just a movie star, but as a cultural and political threat, someone whose influence extended far beyond the silver screen, directly challenging Soviet ideals. Despite multiple assassination attempts orchestrated by the KGB, Wayne, with the help of the FBI and his own resourcefulness, managed to outmaneuver his would-be assassins every time, one that even Stalin's death could not silence. The story of Wayne versus Stalin underscores the power of cinema and ideology in shaping global conflicts, where a Hollywood cowboy could become a real-world symbol of resistance.